This is the third Columbia block game I own. You've seen I just put up the Napoleon one that I have one guy I play with. So that's good. The Julius Caesar one, my son plays. And we played that about 4 or 5 times. I have one video of that up. But the Pacific victory here, I have nobody yet to find to play with. So I'm just going to put a video up of what I think should be done in this game, because that's what I find lacking out there is videos of how to start this game. Because people that are new to the gaming, I mean, this game is going to look, enormous to them and complex. And people need to have an idea of how you go about starting this game, especially how big this one is. And this one is by far the biggest that I own here out of the 3. And the introduction here, I just want to say, is what you need to think about when you're playing the Japanese. I like playing the Japanese in all kinds of Pacific games. I've played quite a few over the years, 5 or 6 of them. And one thing you always got to remember is the Japanese are always fighting too many people. Can't do anything about that. And 2, they always have to go after the money islands, we call them. That's down in the southeast Pacific, Sumatra, Borneo, those islands down there, they must be taken. So any game that starts with a campaign or the 1941 scenario, you have to take the money islands and you have to plan for it. So when you set up this game and you look at it, you need to decide what you're going to do and what pieces you're going to use to do that. Second, you decide which way you're going to conduct any further offensives. You either got to go to China, Britain, in India, or Australia. Now, not a lot of people contemplate going after Hawaii. But if you watch my videos on the Rising Empire of the Rising Sun of Avalon Hill, the sister game to Advanced Third Reich, I put up videos that if you keep striking at Pearl Harbor, you may achieve the outcome you're looking for. So with that being said, we're going to look at doing something like that in this game. Because China, to me, is a losing cause. India is okay to go after, and Australia, I guess, but Australia, to me, don't really win you the game. India could, but the problem is you always have America on the other side, so you're always dividing your forces, which is what the Japanese did. So let's take a historical look at what the strategic plan was, as the way I understand it, of the Japanese, and we're going to know how to go about this. Now, the commander of the Japanese combined fleet was Yurosoko Yamamoto, and he always, from the outset, before the war, said if you want to fight the Americans, we need to cripple the Navy in the Pacific Fleet in Hawaii. The Japanese High Command did not agree with this, or they were scared to. But a long story, I'm not going to go into. He got his way, and he attacked Pearl Harbor and crippled the Pacific Fleet. However, when he found out that the American carriers were not there, he did not see this as a great victory, and he went to the Japanese High Command and told them, we need to go after the American carriers. Now, the High Command again said, yeah, we'll think about it. They were in the middle already of expanding all over Southeast Asia, and they were in the middle of planning the invasion of Port Moresby. known as Operation Mo. Now, what helped Yamamoto in convincing the high command about going after the carriers was the Doolittle raid, which was a carrier strike on Japanese soil, and it worried them. But the planning and the resources were far in advance for Operation Mo that they decided to continue that one. So we had the Battle of the Coral Sea. Now, you'll find in most games, the Japanese do not split their heavy carrier force. The 6 carriers that attack Pearl, they keep them together. And most of the time, they're stationed at either Truk or the southern Philippines. And from there, they can operate, against American carriers. Now, I'll talk about the American side here in a minute, but the Japanese, if they decide to get their defense and then use the carrier arm to defend that barrier, it does work pretty well. Here, the Japanese, they had too many commitments in the Indian Ocean, Rabaul, and this invasion. So at the Battle of the Coral Sea, the Japanese brought 2 of their heavy carriers, the Shokaku and the Zukaku. And the Shokaku got damaged and had to limp back to port for the next year, get repaired, maybe almost 2 years. The Zukaku was depleted in aircraft, and it was sent back to Japan to be refitted and minor repairs done. Now, Yamamoto was furious at the Rear Admiral in charge of this task force in the Battle of Coral Sea, Takaki, because he left. Now, I don't blame him. I mean, the Shokaku was damaged. The Zukaku was low on planes, and the Shoho was sunk. So he really had nothing else to do but to leave. But Yamamoto was so furious because he wanted those American carriers. And he didn't care what it took, but he wanted them sunk. And then as far as the Japanese knew, the 2 American carriers were both damaged. They didn't know to what extent, because eventually, in the mid-afternoon, the Lexington had to be scuttled, and it was sunk there at the Battle of Coral Sea. The Yorktown was able to limp back to Pearl, and that ended the Battle of Coral Sea. Now, the point of this is that Yamamoto wanted the U.S. carriers. He found this to be the most important facet of the Pacific War, carriers. He knew it, even if High Command did not believe him 100%. He knew it. The carriers had to be sought. So he was left with 4 heavy carriers to seek out and destroy the American carriers. And he wanted to do it now before they built up. So in our game, to me, this is the key. We want to seek out the American carriers quickly and decisively. And if you watch the video I put up of Empire and Rising Sun, that's exactly what I go over. Is I keep sending airstrikes to Pearl Harbor. It's very difficult to invade it. It is possible, but it's difficult. In this game, I don't know. I haven't done it, but we're going to see if we can. I think we should direct all the Japanese naval efforts toward the Americans quickly and early as possible and sink their ships. And if we can cripple them enough, it may give us the advantage we need to seek victory. Now remember, as the years go on, the Japanese would never beat the Americans. They're just going to get too powerful. But a lot of pressure was being put on the Japanese to defend their gains and stay inside the barrier, which is a plausible strategy. You got to defend all the production points that you just took. So once again, it's up to you. If Yamamoto thought that the carriers were the most important, then who are we to argue with them? So that's what I want to do in this game. Number 1, you have to take the production cities. But number 2 strategy is to go after America. early in the game. Now, the Americans basically had two ideas, and one was being pushed by MacArthur, and that was attacking from Australia up through New Guinea back to the Philippines. And the other one that most of the Admiralty and the President wanted Nimitz to take the Navy and plow right through the islands to Japan. And because MacArthur, got his way, they decided on both avenues. And that's why the Americans attacked up through Australia and across the islands. They had enough land forces and enough Navy to do it. And personally, if Admiral Nimitz liked that idea, then who am I to argue? And I, for one, do the same thing. So let me tell you something. When I play the Americans and I see the Japanese player sit in a barrier with his 6 carriers at Truk or the Philippines, I count my lucky stars, because then it gives me time to get my army where I want, and I send it in piecemeal, and I don't care if I lose carriers or not. Remember, the Americans can outproduce the Japanese. If I lose 2 carriers, I better make sure I sink one of his. Next battle, if I lose 2 carriers, I better make sure I sink one of his. And that's what I do. And then the idea of going in 2 spots I really love, because if he wants to keep his 6 carriers together, he can't cover both spots. So he either has to hit one or the other. And so I like the idea of hitting in both spots as the American player. And that's what we'll try to do here. We're going to try to hit across the islands, and we're going to try to come out of Australia. Now, a lot of the Pacific games I played, the American player does hold on to New Guinea, but they strike at the Money Islands over there at Java and Borneo, and they island hop that way. I even done it before. You go straight at them, and the Japanese have to defend it. Without the production of those islands, the Japanese economy sinks. And of course, all wars are fought on the economy. So if you just make the Japanese defend in one spot, it's pretty easy for them. I mean, you're going to have a real fight on your hands. That's why I always like the 2-pronged attack by the Americans, because, you make them defend different areas. I've seen Japanese players do nothing but defend those islands and protect Japan, who cares about everything else. So the Money Islands are very important. Hence, when I see a Japanese sit back and defend his barrier, it allows me time as an American player to get my forces gathered, put them where I want, and take the initiative to him, and to build up in Australia. That's why, as a Japanese player, I do not like to give the Americans that kind of time, and that's why I go at them early, quickly, right away at Pearl, to force the Americans to fight, and I try to sink carriers. If the Americans are trying to defend their homeland, then they can't start building up forces to go after your production cities. That's just the way I see it. Now, it could make for a quick game, because if you roll bad, you're going to lose your fleet and the game's over. However, that's the chance you got to take. Yamamoto knew it, and he lost at the Battle of Midway in 1942, but Japanese didn't surrender until 45. I mean, that's how long you have. You can still defend yourself after you seek out this decisive engagement and you destroy American fleets. So, as an American player, I do like the Japanese sitting back. It is a tough task when they're trying to defend and just defend, but it gives me the initiative. You got to have the initiative. You always try to hold on to it in any game you play, and the Japanese will surrender it. If he's attacking me straight out, I'm put on the defensive, and he keeps the initiative. So, remember, I'm a rookie at this game. I've never played it, but that is the goal and the strategy set, and that's what I'm going to try to accomplish. So when you approach this game, you got to have those goals in mind, and then you'll better understand what you want done.